Hey teachers, Shannon here from TEFL Horizons. Welcome back, or welcome in general, if this is the first time that you're joining me for a video. Now, if you've just started teaching or are about to start teaching a new group course, you probably want to give your students a chance to get to know each other, get comfortable using English together, and kick things off in that very first lesson with a fun, interactive activity. So in this video, I'm going to share a fun icebreaker with you that's perfect for that first lesson of a brand new group course. And just to clarify, when I say icebreaker, I'm not talking about a quick 5 or 10 minute warm-up activity that you could do at the beginning of any lesson. I mean a more involved activity that you would do at the start just of a brand new course. So something that helps the students get to know each other and helps you create rapport with that new group of students. The great thing about the icebreaker that I'm going to show you in this video is that you can use it for both in-person and online classes. So it's really versatile, and I'll give you some advice on the logistics of the activity to make it work for either format. Okay, so let's get into it. The icebreaker activity that I'm going to share with you is a variation of the traditional Find Someone Who game, but this time it's Find Someone Who Bingo. So for this icebreaker, you'll need to create a bingo card with different questions or statements that could pertain to members of your class. And to give you an example, I actually created a bingo card with have you ever questions, such as have you ever driven across your country? Have you ever run in a race or a marathon? And even have you ever been stuck in an elevator? So if you want to download my exact bingo card, I'm more than happy to share it with you. I'll leave the link for you in the video notes below here, where you can download it and then use it in your own icebreaker lesson. And the other great thing about this activity is that it's really easy to adapt for different levels just by changing the complexity of the grammar in the questions or statements on the bingo card. So, for example, if your students haven't studied the present perfect yet, in which case my have you ever grammar questions would probably be a little bit too advanced for them, then you could easily change the heading from have you ever on the bingo card to simply find someone who, and then the questions or statements could be in the simple past. So for example, find someone who traveled outside of their country last year, or find someone who went camping this past summer. You could also simplify it even further by just using present simple statements. So find someone who has a cat, or find someone who doesn't like the color orange. So just by changing the prompts on the bingo card, you can make the activity more manageable even for lower level students, since the grammar won't be as advanced. But either way, the students still get to have that great mingling, interactive, getting to know each other time in that first lesson. And also, quick aside, because it's so easy to change the prompts to include different grammatical structures, this activity can easily double as a grammar review activity, maybe later on in your course. So if you want to give your students some fun, sort of outside the box, interactive practice with a particular grammar structure, just change the prompts on the bingo card to include the grammar structure that you want to practice. Okay, so back to how this icebreaker works. If you teach in person, you can simply print out the bingo sheet and make a copy for each student, and then obviously hand them out in your physical class. If you're teaching online, you can simply share the bingo document in the chat for students to download on their own device, or you could put that bingo sheet into a Google Doc and then share the Google Doc link with your students. Obviously, just make sure you update your share settings on the Google Doc so that students have permission to view the document, but not edit it since you don't want them deleting anything on that shared doc. Then, the key to making this activity work, whether online or in person, is to tell the students that they can only write down each classmate's name one time. So for example, if I'm a student and I ask my classmate Carlos if he's ever been camping, and he says yes, then I can write his name down for that one in that square on my bingo card, but I can't ask him any more questions or write his name down in any of the other squares. I have to move on and find other names to write down in those other squares. And then obviously if Carlos answers no to my first question, I can continue to ask him questions until I find one that he says yes to. Then I have to move on after that. So this way, the students don't get stuck in sort of one long pair discussion. They're kind of compelled to keep moving around and talking to different people. An exception here is if you have a very small class, maybe 3, 4, 5 students, then you could definitely change the rules and say that the students can write down the same classmate's name for multiple squares. Otherwise, it's going to be pretty hard for them to get a bingo because they're simply going to run out of people to ask. All right, so that mingling part, the students moving around and asking different people different questions, I think that's pretty easy to envision if you're teaching in a physical classroom, right? Students can just stand up and walk around the room and ask different classmates questions. But how does that work online? Believe it or not, it can be done. You can make a mingle work online by putting the students in breakout rooms with 2 or 3 students per room, and then repeatedly mixing up the breakout rooms on a kind of timed rotation. So how it's going to work is after every couple of minutes, you're going to mix up the breakout rooms so each student ends up with a different partner for the next couple of minutes. In order for this not to get confusing, I recommend pulling up your breakout rooms menu so that you can see which students are in each room. And then you're going to move just the first student in each room down to the next room. So when it's time to switch up the rooms, when it's time to switch up the pairings, you'll look at your breakout rooms menu list and you'll look and see what's the first name in breakout room 1, right? You're going to move that student down to breakout room 2. Look at what's the top name in breakout room 2 and move that student down to breakout room 3, and so forth, all the way down to moving the top name in the very last room, move that person up to breakout room 1. So this way, essentially one person in each room has just shifted down one room, and each student should now have a new partner. So then after a couple minutes in that new configuration, you're going to repeat that process for the next rotation and so forth. So that way you're moving the same students every time, and the same students are staying in the room every time, meaning that you won't accidentally pair the same students up again, right, until the cycle of rotations is complete and they end up back with their original partners, at which time the activity should be finished. For this to work best, I recommend letting the students know in advance that they're going to be moving. So let them know that they'll have just a couple of minutes in each room with each partner, and that they will then automatically be switched to work with a new partner after every couple of minutes. You can even use that broadcast message to all rooms feature to give the students maybe a 10 or 15 second time warning before you rotate the pairs. So that way the students won't be confused, right? When somebody suddenly disappears from their breakout room or appears in their breakout room, they'll have a warning that, okay, your partner is going to change in 10 seconds. That also gives them some time to, kind of wrap up their final question or whatever they're talking about in that moment. As the students are doing the activity, what you can be doing is monitoring their progress by going from breakout room to make sure the students are on task and check how they're doing, right? Check their progress towards getting a bingo. And then obviously, if you're teaching in person, you'll also want to be doing that same thing. You'll just be monitoring by walking around the room and kind of listening in on the different students' conversations to check their progress that way. Feel free to let the activity continue until you have finished all of the breakout room rotations, or until you notice from your monitoring in person or in the breakout rooms online that students are starting to get bingos. So at that point, bring everybody back together, either close the breakout rooms or ask the students in your in-person classroom to return to their seats, and then do some feedback on the activity. So you can do feedback by asking who got a bingo, and then you can nominate some students to share things that they learned about their classmates. You can even follow up with a little bit of language feedback if you noticed any errors that you would like to address. And voila, that's the bingo activity. Before we finish this video though, here are just a couple of things to keep in mind to make sure this activity runs as smoothly as possible. All right, so number 1 is, of course, the very first thing you're going to want to do before you even start this activity is to check and make sure your students are familiar with the way the bingo game works and how you win, right? What it means to get a bingo. To do this, I like to show a picture of sort of a generic looking bingo card and do some eliciting from the students. I'll ask them, do you know what this game is called? Have you played it before? How does it work? How do you win? And so that way we can establish the basic rules, we can establish the general way that bingo works and the logistics, you need to get a row of 5 across or up and down or diagonally in order to get a bingo. And this way we can avoid a lot of potential confusion if there are students in my group who've never played a bingo game before. So that's something you'll want to get out of the way right up front. Number 2, if you think that there are vocabulary words on your bingo card in the prompts that your students probably won't know, you'll want to plan for this in advance. So go through the card and see if you do have any words you anticipate as being blocking words or challenging words for your students. The easiest way to deal with those is just to have pictures ready to show the students to clarify if they come up. For example, on my bingo card, if I think that my students might not know the word skydiving in English, I'll just have a picture of somebody skydiving ready to show them. If they don't ask, if it doesn't come up, then I can skip it. But that way, if they ask, right, excuse me, what does skydiving mean? I can quickly show them that picture and that clears it up immediately. So this is way more efficient just showing the picture rather than trying to explain skydiving with some sort of long verbal description. The other option, of course, is to just only use vocabulary on your bingo card that you're pretty confident your students already know. Remember, this is not meant to be a big vocabulary test, and you don't want to have to spend 20 minutes teaching all the new vocabulary words on the bingo card before you can even start the activity. The focus here is really just meant to be on speaking and the students getting to know each other and breaking the ice, so avoiding a lot of new vocabulary for this particular activity is a good idea. The third thing you'll want to keep in mind is that instructions for activities like this, activities that are a little bit more involved and are sort of, games with rules, they tend to be a little bit more complicated than you might assume, especially if you're teaching online. But even in person, make sure that you set up the activity so that students can't just avoid the speaking aspect of the activity if they want to. For example, you don't want a situation where, let's say, I'm a student and I'm walking around the room just handing my bingo card to other people so that they can look for one of the prompts that's true for them and then write their name down and pass the sheet back to me. In that case, we can do the entire activity without saying a word, right? So you don't want that to happen. The whole point is to get the students talking and engaged and involved and getting to know each other. So you can preempt this potential problem with really clear instructions and a little bit of planning in advance. You can tell the students, for example, that they aren't allowed to look at each other's bingo cards. Or if you're really worried about this situation happening, you could even put slightly different prompts on different cards and then tell the students they can't look at each other's bingo cards. So the only way to find out the information about each other is to verbally ask, right, their partner and then write down their partner's name. And as always, with any instructions, the best way to set up the activity clearly is with an interactive demo. So before you even start the activity, after you've given instructions, but before you start the activity, I would say choose one of your more confident students and do a little practice round with that student in front of the class. So that way everybody can see exactly how the activity works. You can demonstrate what to do if the person you're asking says yes, right? You write down their name and then you have to ask somebody else. And you can demonstrate what to do if the person answers no to a question, then you can ask them another question. And number 4 has to do with timing. So I love activities that provide for flexibility with timing so that you can extend the activity or shorten the activity to fit with the time that you have in your lesson. So for this particular activity, if you want to extend the bingo game and make it a bit longer, you can always change the rules about how students win. So maybe they need to get 2 bingos to win before the game is over. Or maybe you even tell your students to try and fill up the entire bingo card and find a different student's name for each square. Obviously, that's going to depend on the number of students you have and the amount of time you have, because that's probably going to take a while. And remember as well, in terms of the actual bingo prompts, you'll want to choose these so that it's likely that at least some of the students will be able to answer yes to each thing, right? But not all of them. So if you make the prompts too easy and too general, like find someone who likes music, almost everybody could say yes to that, then the students are all going to get bingos very quickly and they're not really learning anything more unique about each other. But then on the other hand, if you make them too obscure, right, they're things that nobody is likely to have done, then the students are probably going to get discouraged because the prompts don't really pertain to any of them. They can't actually win the game, and they're not really learning anything new about each other that way either. All right, are you excited to try out bingo with your students? If you are, let me know in the comments. And if you do try it, I would love for you to come back here and comment and let me know how it goes with your students. And don't forget to click the link if you want that bingo card. I've dropped it here for you in the video description so you can download the card and enjoy. And I'll see you in the next video.